Part 104. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 1031. Chapter 1031 A Chaotic Wedding 9. The helicopter slowly stopped at the edge of the wedding venue, and a handsome middle-aged man stepped out of the plane with a loudspeaker in his hand, which he did not turn off. "Hurry up and drive them away," Xian Kaiping directed the bodyguards to drive them away. A group of bodyguards had already rushed up. The well-prepared middle-aged man also brought some bodyguards with him and was already fighting with Xian Kaiping's people. Got up. When Qian Yuman saw the middle-aged man coming off the helicopter, she was so surprised that she forgot to speak. She was so familiar with this man. Isn't this man her former father-in-law, Tang Yu's father Tang Wentao? How could he appear here and call Xian? Qian Yuman slapped her head and remembered that Tang Wentao also loved her mother deeply. She once thought that Tang Wentao and her mother were the same, and she thought she might be Tang Wentao's daughter. Tang Wentao once said that he and Qian Xian were lovers before, but his mother failed him. Why now? Could it be that Li Ning is really the mother? Qian Yuman showed an expression of disbelief, both happy and sad, and immediately waved her hand and patted Tang Yuj. "Quickly, record the video and I will bring it to my dad." Qian Yuman was still torturing Tang Yuj to record the scene. She took it back to show her dad at night, but she didn't expect Qi Zhan to get off the helicopter as well. How did they get together? Tang Yuj was also surprised when he saw his father's appearance. Then he quickly understood what happened to make Tang Wentao appear here, and he also understood the relationship between these three people, love rivals. Qian Yuman immediately ran to Li Ning's side, but even she was stopped by Xian Kaiping's bodyguards. "Uncle Xian, why don't you let me go? Are you feeling guilty?" Qian Yuman directly exposed Xian Kaiping's intention. She finally understood that she was fooled. Last time she took away Li Ning, no, it was Qian Xian. When she was getting her hair done, there was a moment when her hair fell from her hands and fell to the ground. It must have been at that time that Xian Kaiping changed her hair. With this thought, everything made sense. No wonder she had always thought that Li Ning was Qian Xian and had always been suspicious. However, she believed too much in the paternity test, so she was tricked by Xian Kaiping. He must have seen his intentions before taking advantage of this opportunity to reconcile her with her father, but he forgot that Tang Wentao also deeply loved Qian Xian and would not be easily fooled by him. Tang Wentao was not stopped by the bodyguards. The bodyguards he brought were all mercenary level. He had been prepared for a long time. How could these people stop him? With the loudspeaker in his hand, how could they stop him? Come out with the truth. Li Ning, I want to tell you that your real name is not Li Ning, but Qian Xian. You have been deceived by the scum Xian Kaiping. He made up a past and deceived you. You must not be with him. When you get married, you must not marry a liar. This liar will make you lose your memory and make up a false past for you. Li Ning lifted her veil and looked at Tang Wentao, who suddenly barged in. When she saw his face clearly, she opened her lips in surprise and disbelief. You. Li Ning covered her mouth, her beautiful peach blossom eyes widened. He recognized this face because it felt familiar. Tang Wentao's face was exactly the same as the face that often appeared in her memory. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 1032. Chapter 1032 A Chaotic Wedding 10. He recognized this face because it felt familiar. Tang Wentao's face was exactly the same as a face that often appeared in her memory. She had always wondered who this person was. When she asked Xian Kaiping about it, he casually said they were just friends and did not tell him the truth. Thinking about what he said just now, each sentence was like a stone hitting her heart. If it had been said by someone else, a stranger, she would never have had such a big reaction. but it was Tang Wentao who appeared, a person who occupied a large part of her memories when she was young, and she could not turn a blind eye. The person in front of her knew her, and what he said was probably true. Ning listen to my explanation, don't listen to his nonsense. Xian Kaiping nervously held Qian Xianer's hand while glaring at Tang Wentao, wishing he could destroy the man in front of him who ruined his wedding at the critical moment. Tang Wentao, you are very talented. Explanation? What explanation? Is it another lie you made? Are you embarrassed to continue to use those false lies to tie up Xianer? You did this 25 years ago, and you still do it 25 years later? Is it possible after all these years? Didn't you learn a lesson at all? You are so naive that you think the love that comes from deception is love. Tang Wentao's words are incomprehensible to outsiders, but to Xian Kaiping's ears are knives cutting into his heart. Ning I. Xian Kaiping turned around anxiously and wanted to explain to Qian Xianer. He knew that there was no way to explain to anyone else now. Only explaining to Qian Xianer would be useful. However, he saw a confused face and those pair of eyes. Suspicion has already appeared in his eyes. What Tang Wentao said is very useful, and Qian Xianer has already believed it a little. My name is Qian Xianer said firmly. I. Qian Xianer looked around, clenched her hands into fists without getting angry, looked at the guests present, and Qian Yuman, who had been trying to rush over, turned and walked forward. Xian Kaiping thought Qian Xianer was leaving and was completely panicked. Qian Xianer didn't want to leave. Instead, she walked up to the host and took the microphone from his hand. Dear guests, I am very sorry that you have to watch a performance that is comparable to an idol drama. This wedding has been temporarily postponed. We have prepared exquisite food. The maids will take you to a gourmet feast later. Thank you for coming to this wedding. Qian Xianer bowed deeply, then looked at Tang Wentao and nodded to him. Xian Kaiping's hand that wanted to stop her from leaving dropped, and he looked sadly at the woman with her back to him. Is she going to leave him? Have you left yourself again? He doesn't want her to leave. Xian Kaiping was about to leave, ready to keep this woman no matter what, but she didn't expect that she would walk up to Xian Kaiping, reach out and grab his hand, and smile gently at him. Without too many words, he led her slowly away from the wedding venue. Today the bride and groom have left, and the guests present have also gone to have dinner. Qian Yuman immediately ran to Qi Zhan and Tang Wentao. Dad. She looked at Tang Wentao, who had always been at odds with her, and instead of shouting out the dad she had called before, she politely called out Mr. Tang. Tang Wentao didn't care what Qian Yuman called him. What he was more concerned about now was Qian Xianer's affairs. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1033. Chapter 1033 A Chaotic Wedding 11. Tang Wentao didn't care what Qian Yuman called him. What he was more concerned about now was Qian Xianer's affairs. Tang Wentao walked in the direction where Qian Xianer left, preventing Xian Kaiping from hiding Qian Xianer. Dad, what's going on? Why are you here? Qian Yuman asked in confusion. This morning, although his father was in a bad mood, he did not indicate that he would come to Xian Kaiping's wedding today. How come not long after they separated, he and Tang Wentao came over together? Qi Zhan sighed deeply. Actually, I've been sure that she is Xianer a long time ago, even if you said the paternity test results prove that she is not. When Qi Zhan met Li Ning, he was sure that Li Ning was Qian Xianer through various detailed observations. Although there are many doubts and mysteries that cannot be solved, there is also a paternity test report with conclusive evidence. But in his heart, he had long recognized that Li Ning was Jian Xian'er. The feeling of being with Jian Xian'er was too familiar, and the feeling of familiarity was too strong. They used to be a couple who had been sleeping together for 17 years. They knew each other very well and could guess what they said with just one look or word. Qi Zhan loved Jian Xian'er deeply, and a familiar feeling appeared after meeting Li Ning. Although he thought at first that he only regarded Li Ning as Jian Xian'er's substitute, he could not admit it in his heart. After leaving Li Ning, Qi Zhan could not admit it. He thought about it, and finally came to the conclusion that she was Jian Xian'er. The woman he loved deeply, there must be some situation that he didn't know about. But just relying on his feelings and familiar actions, these things cannot prove that Li Ning is Jian Xian'er. Even if he went to talk to Jian Xian'er, Li Ning would not believe it. Instead, he felt that there was something wrong with him and that he missed him too much. Lover. And the wedding was about to start, and he couldn't do anything at all, so he had been in a bad and melancholy mood these past few days. Dad, you've already decided? Jian Yuman was actually surprised that Qi Zhan actually knew everything. I wasn't 100% sure at first. Early this morning, Mr. Tang came to me and told me that Li Ning was Jian Xian'er, the woman he loved deeply. He said that Xian'er was really deceived by Xian Kaiping, so he took the helicopter took me with him to expose Xian Kaiping's lies. Tang Wentao loves his mother deeply, he must have known it for a long time. In her memory, Tang Wentao once told her that her mother once became the third party in Tang Wentao's marriage, but her mother later withdrew, deeply hurting Tang Wentao. She didn't know the specific details, but she could guess a few things, except that her mother recognized her mistake and left. But today she was not sure whether Tang Wentao was telling the truth. After all, Xian Yuanxun must be the son of Jian Xian'er and Xian Kaiping. Before he and Qi Zhan, Jian Xian'er had a relationship and gave birth to a son for it. As for what happened in it, which caused Jian Xian'er to leave Xian Kaiping, cut off contact with Tang Wentao, and marry Qi Zhan, it was an unforgettable love story. Dad, let's go and listen to what Tang Wentao has to say. Qi Zhan, pulled by his daughter, also followed their departure. Kenny looked at Jian Yuman, and finally chose not to go with him. It was better to work with Xian Yingzhi to improve the mood of these guests. What was a wonderful wedding has now become so heavy. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1034. Chapter 1034 Li Ning is Jian Xian'er 1. Kenny looked at Jian Yuman, and finally chose not to go with him. It was better to work with Xian Yingzhi to improve the mood of these guests. What was a wonderful wedding has now become so heavy. Tang Yuzhi took the initiative to help Xian Yuanxun and followed him in a wheelchair. In the banquet hall, everyone who should be present is present, and everyone has a different expression on their face. The atmosphere was a bit depressing, and the dull atmosphere at the moment had not been broken yet. Everyone looked at the person they wanted to see each other. Jian Xian'er had already changed into her clothes, Xian Kaiping was lifeless, Tang Wentao was angry, but the others were calmer. The atmosphere was too depressing. The first person to speak was Jian Xian'er. She knew that what was needed most at this time was for her to stand up and ask questions. Jian Xian'er looked at Tang Wentao, smiled gently, and asked politely. "Excuse me, sir, what is your name?" "Tang Wentao, you used to call me Xiao Tao," Tang Wentao said a little excitedly. His eyes were always looking at Jian Xian'er affectionately. Looking at this strange and familiar face, he wanted to forget that he had not seen him for more than 20 years. When I saw Jian Xian'er, I hugged her hard. His thoughts did not disappear with the passage of time at all. Sometimes, time is the best healing medicine, but time is of no use to him at all. He is still close to her deeply, and he still can't forget her smile. When he sees her, he can't help but want to the idea that she took it for herself. Tao, when Qian Xian'er heard this name, even though there was an image of him in her mind, she still couldn't do it the way she did before. I'd better call you Mr. Tang. Qian Xian'er's words made the smile on Tang Wentao's face freeze for a few seconds. You can call me whatever you like. Tang Wentao was quite open-minded and did not take this seriously. Mr. Tang, just now you told me at my wedding that I was deceived by Kai Ping. What did you mean? And you keep calling me Xian'er, why is that? Tang Wentao's anger was suddenly ignited, and he pointed angrily at Xian Kaiping and burst into cynicism. You silly woman, why do you believe what he said? He called you Ning-er, are you really Li Ning? Your real name is Qian Xian'er, the woman I once loved most, and this man is just the mistress in our relationship. He didn't you away from me, you should have been mine. Tang Wentao, can you stop being so shameless? Did I take Xian'er away? It's obvious that you don't know how to cherish it. Xian Kaiping's anger also began to soar and he fought back. Do you know how to cherish her? Didn't you hurt her severely? Why did I hurt her? It wasn't because of you. It's clear that you are wrong, don't talk nonsense in front of Xian'er. The two men began to argue endlessly, and their faces turned red. If Qian Xian'er hadn't been there, they might have really fought. The onlookers were speechless for a while, but one thing was basically certain. There was no need to press. Xian Kaiping had already taken the initiative to reveal Li Ning's identity as Qian Xian'er. Mom, it's really Mom. Qian Yuman flew over excitedly, holding Qian Xian'er's hand with trembling hands, and her eyes began to fill with tears. Manman Qian Xian'er opened her mouth slightly and smiled, but tears flowed from her eyes involuntarily. 2 lines of tears contain too much. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1035. Chapter 1035. Li Ning is Qian Xian'er too. Manman Qian Xian'er opened her mouth slightly and smiled, but tears flowed from her eyes involuntarily. 2 lines of tears contain too much. Xian Kaiping's words just now made it true that he is Qian Xian'er's identity. At the same time, he also understood why Xian Kaiping said so many incomprehensible things to himself before the wedding. He really had something to hide from himself, but he was cautiously testing himself. In the past, she had been living in lies spun by Xian Kaiping, which made her sad and sad. However, she understood that Xian Kaiping really loved her deeply, which made her very painful. Mom, it's really my mother. Qian Yuman, have been looking for my mother for 3 years and finally found my mother. Qian Yuman also cried, tears falling down. She is happy, very happy. She has been worried about her mother's safety for so many years, dreaming back countless times at midnight, thinking about her life with her mother around. Growing up, her mother was kind to her. Her disappearance made Qian Yuman the most helpless at first. When her mother was ill, she almost sacrificed her own happiness for the 1 million surgery fee. Fortunately, Tang Yuj appeared in her life and saved her, but she lost her mother. In the past 3 years, she has been running around for her mother. As long as there is any news about her mother, she will fly there. After being disappointed again and again and searching again and again, she almost gave up on looking for her mother. But fortunately, my mother appeared in front of me again. She was really happy to know that Li Ning was her mother. She cried sadly for a long time when she thought of the paternity test that confirmed that Li Ning was not the mother. Now the truth is revealed, Li Ning is really his mother. Her most beloved mother. Silly boy. Qian Xian'er gently stroked Qian Yuman's head. The maternal love rising from the bottom of her heart directly hugged Qian Yuman into her arms, coaxing the child like a baby. The mother and daughter hugged each other affectionately here, while Tang Wentao and Xian Kaiping over there had been arguing for a long time, and neither of them seemed to admit defeat. You two, stop arguing. Qi Zhan really couldn't stand it anymore. They say that men who are immersed in love are childish. Two men with successful careers were noisy as if they were children, but they were completely ignoring his ex-husband, Jian Xian'er. He can be a little sure that when he married Jian Xian'er, she was getting married for the first time. So these men are at most Jian Xian'er's former boyfriends, and they are love rivals whom they haven't seen for many years. They fought for Jian Xian'er, but they didn't get Jian Xian'er. How could he have a chance if they didn't? Who do you think you are? The two men yelled at Qi Zhan in unison, even spitting. Tang Wentao was speechless for a while, then he took a sigh of relief and pointed at himself. I am Xian'er's ex-husband. No matter how much you quarrel, it will become a thing of the past before me. Besides, you are old and you are always quarreling. Don't you want to see what Xian'er thinks? As soon as the two men heard this, they went berserk and started to attack Qi Zhan. You also said that you are an ex-husband. Do you think an ex-husband is embarrassed to laugh at us old lovers? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1036. Chapter 1036 Li Ning is Jian Xian'er 3. You also said that you are an ex-husband. Do you think an ex-husband is embarrassed to laugh at us old lovers? Don't think you're just a flower. You're just an onion, let alone my love rival. Can you compare with us in all aspects? Tang Wentao snorted arrogantly. Qi Zhan's originally gentle face sank and he straightened his posture. Xian'er and I have been sleeping together for 17 years. We have held a wedding and registered our marriage. At the beginning, I was just the target of discord. When it comes to Xian'er, I don't remember that we are weaker than them. How much? After all, if you are so powerful, Xian'er would not have chosen to marry me. Qi Zhan said plausibly. Indeed, as Qi Zhan said, he was the one who really enjoyed the life of a couple with Jian Xian'er. They are just predecessors, people who are behind him. Qi Zhan's words immediately extinguished most of the anger between the two of them. I don't care what happened to you and Xian'er in the past, and it's not a matter of quarrel with you now. I need you, Xian Kaiping, to explain clearly what's going on. As for your past, it's up to you whether to talk about it, because it won't affect me at all. Nothing. Dad Xian Yuanxun pushed the wheelchair over and looked at his father, Xian Kaiping. Am I mom's child? Yes, Xian Kaiping nodded. Xian Yuanxun was his and Jian Xian'er's son. Then why does the situation you told me seem to be different from what Mr. Tang said, and it's very different. In fact, Xian Yuanxun has always known Jian Xian'er's identity, but the version he knew was obviously problematic. More than a year later, Xian Kaiping brought his mother back and told him that he finally found her, but something happened. Xian Yuanxun, who had never known who his mother was, finally found out when he met Jian Xian'er. But the version is that Jian Xian'er and Xian Kaiping were once a loving couple. Before they had time to get married, they separated because of a misunderstanding, leaving him as their child. Jian Xian'er, who left Xian Kaiping, once had a pair of daughters with someone else, but they divorced a few years ago. She was severely hurt by the South, so she came to Xian Kaiping, saying that she wanted to put aside everything in the past and start a new life. The two got back together. But later Jian Xian'er fell ill. After recovering from the illness, she lost all her previous memories and became a completely new person. Xian Kaiping, who originally wanted to put the past behind him, went along with the flow and concealed what happened after she left, and even changed his name. At first he thought that his father changed his mother's name just to completely break away from the past, but it didn't work. His father did it deliberately and wanted to hide the truth. Son, I. Xian Kaiping was speechless for a moment. If he continued to lie, he would not get any benefits, and it would make Jian Xian'er even more disappointed in him. In the end, he chose not to lie. Alas, Xian Kaiping sighed deeply. It was the best answer. It had explained everything. He had deceived Xian Yuanxun before, even his own son. Humph, you old fool, it turns out that you even hid your own son. Tang Wentao couldn't help but taunted, and Xian Kaiping was naturally unhappy. The two almost quarreled again, but Jian Yuman stopped them with a roar. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1037. Chapter 1037. Li Ning is Jian Xian'er 4. Humph, you old fool, it turns out that you even hid your own son. Tang Wentao couldn't help but taunted, and Xian Kaiping was naturally unhappy. The two almost quarreled again, but Jian Yuman stopped them with a roar. Don't you think it's a shame for you, as elders, to keep quarreling in front of your juniors? I can't understand why the two men only quarreled as soon as they met and refused to listen. It's fun to quarrel every chance they get. The two men were furious for a while, and both of them suppressed the anger in their hearts. The most urgent thing now is, should you tell me what relationship my mother had with you back then? The person who needs to know the truth most now is my mother, not us juniors. Jian Yuman pushed her mother out and directly pushed her to the Three Kingdoms stand in the middle. Jian Xian'er stood a little awkwardly among them and smiled at them. Can anyone explain what happened? Let me tell you. Tang Wentao took a step forward, looked at Jian Xian'er affectionately, and talked about what happened back then. You and I were childhood sweethearts who grew up together. Your parents were servants of my Tang family back then. Your father was my family's chef and your mother was my family's housekeeper. We have been close friends since we were young. You shouldn't treat me like you are the young master of the Tang family, and I am not only your servant, I often play around in school. When you were 18, we fell in love and I confessed to you. Got it, so she wants to break us up and kick your parents out. But we still continued to fall in love and maintain a relationship with each other. My mother made an engagement for me. Even so, you still stayed with me. One day, my uncle and aunt died in a car accident. I took you here alone, but my mother didn't agree. At that time, I was a good brother with that Xian Kaiping, so I entrusted you to his family to help me take care of you. But I didn't expect that taking care of you would take you away from me. Tang Wentao looked at Xian Kaiping with eyes full of hatred and pain, wanting to rush over and fight him. Tang Wentao, you said that I am shameless, but you are the most shameless one? Why don't you tell me why I was able to Xian'er from your hands? Don't look like I'm sorry, it's you who are sorry for Xian'er. Under your coaxing, Xian'er has been dating you. Even though she knew you had a fiancé, she still expected you to protect her, love her, and finally marry her. I did fall in love with Xian'er from the beginning, but I did. I have always had a secret love, and I knew you were together. But you hurt Xian'er. You actually secretly married your fiancé Yu Wenjing without telling Xian'er and me, and even got pregnant with your child. It was all hidden by you, but if Yu Wenjing came to the door, the two of us would still be kept in the dark. Xian Kaiping roared angrily. At this moment, the other Tang Yuj, who had been quiet all this time, looked at his father with twinkling eyes. It turns out that this is the truth. In fact, he is also one of the insiders about the relationship between Jian Xian'er and Tang Wentao. After all, the matter between Jian Xian'er and Tang Wentao was a big deal. At first, he thought Jian Xian'er was a mistress, even though Tang Wentao was still married to him. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1038. Chapter 1038. Li Ning is Jian Xian'er 5. In fact, he is also one of the insiders about the relationship between Jian Xian'er and Tang Wentao. After all, the matter between Jian Xian'er and Tang Wentao was a big deal. At first, he thought Qian Xian'er was a mistress. Even though Tang Wentao was married, she was still with him. Unexpectedly, it turned out that it was Tang Wentao who deliberately concealed it, which made the uninformed Qian Xian'er is still by his side, inexplicably becoming a mistress without knowing it. Tang Wentao's face turned ugly when Xian Kaiping spoke to him. He blushed and faced Qian Xian'er's anxious explanation. "No, I was forced by my mother. She forced me because I couldn't inherit the inheritance, and I didn't want to marry her. As for the child, it was also my mother's request, saying that if she gave birth to a son, it would help us. That's why Yu Wenjing became pregnant." Qian Xian'er has been listening calmly, as if telling other people's stories. This is indeed the case for her, and she has not been touched at all in her heart. Qian Yuman looked at Tang Yuj with some discomfort and saw that he was clenching his hands into fists, trying hard to suppress the sadness and pain in his heart. Tang Wentao, this bastard, is so despicable no matter how old he is. He kept saying that it was all because of Grandma Tang, so couldn't he think of other ways? Do we have to do what Grandma Tang said? He even said in front of Tang Yuj that he was born just to divorce Tang's mother. Could it be that the son was not important at all in his heart, and did he not consider that Yu Wenjing was Tang Yuj's mother? For his selfish behavior, he treated Yu Wenjing as a tool to give birth to children, and also concealed his marriage from the woman he loved, causing Qian Xian'er to be mistressed. It's ridiculous to say how right you are after doing it. Just continue to quibble. You say you love Xian'er, but you hurt her like that. Is this the way you love? Can you understand the pain of Yu Wenjing calling her mistress repeatedly and being the culprit who destroyed her marriage? Being able to be with her is also your credit, giving me the opportunity to confess that I love her. Humph, that sounds nice, Tang Wentao sneered. Since Xian'er left me, I tried hard to get a divorce, and finally succeeded, but when I saw her with you, I could have given you my blessing, but how did you treat Xian'er? If my place is a pit of fire, you are in hell. You didn't cherish her, you even let her get pregnant for you, but you didn't marry her. Don't you think you were playing with her body and emotions? Xian Kaiping's face looked ugly. He looked at Qian Xian'er anxiously and hurriedly explained. Xian'er, it's not that I don't want to give you a wedding, but my father doesn't agree. He dislikes your status and background. He promised us that as long as you can have a son, he will allow you to marry into my family. But I... Xian'er in the end, Kaiping couldn't finish his words because he knew exactly what he did and said after that. Why don't you continue? Tang Wentao mocked again. Sorry to say. That's my case. Not long after Xian'er gave birth to his son, your family has never talked about the wedding. They have been dragging the child to full term, and you haven't expressed anything. I just used some small tricks to make him. You misunderstood that Xian'er and I were getting back together and wanted to take her away. Xian'er also wanted to stimulate you in this way, but she didn't expect that you would see us together. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1039. Chapter 1039. Li Ning is Qian Xian'er 6. Sorry to say. That's my case. Not long after Xian'er gave birth to his son, your family has never talked about the wedding. They have been dragging the child to full term, and you haven't expressed anything. I just used some small tricks to make him. You misunderstood that Xian'er and I were getting back together and wanted to take her away. Xian'er also wanted to stimulate you in this way, but I didn't expect that when you saw us together, you said harsh words to Xian'er and even humiliated her. Jing Kefa will finally let Xian'er cut off contact with both of us. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be involved by Xian'er and no longer have contact with her. If it weren't for you, she would definitely choose one of us, and you wouldn't know how to cherish it. I can't afford to marry her, and I want to make her pregnant. That's not because you went too far. I misunderstood and said it in a fit of anger. I didn't expect that Sienna would never come back as soon as he left. If you didn't say too much, would she leave? If you didn't marry her and said hurtful words, would she leave? If I were a scumbag, you would be a who combines human sword with sword. You lied to her, your body gave birth to a child for you and gave her expectations, but in the end it hurt her. I regret it too. It wasn't you who was the one to sow discord. Would I say that? You may not know that my father has already promised me to marry her. I just didn't have time to say it. You can say whatever you want now, but you know best whether it is true or not. I don't have to lie. You're just a sanctimonious bitch. Accidentally, the two men started quarreling again, and they couldn't stop. However, we have already understood it from their quarreling and overthrowing. It was two men who hurt Chi and Sienna, and Chi and Sienna fell in love with two men respectively, but neither of them had good results. Because their family background is not good and they are not strong enough, maybe because they are young, they always cannot pass the test of their elders. As a result, Chi and Sienna was hurt and scarred, and in the end she wanted no one and started over in a new place. Subsequently, she met Chi-Jean, married him, and gave birth to sisters Chi and Yuman. As a result, she and Chi-Jean divorced because of Wang Yuan. Chi and Sienna had 3 relationships in her life, each of which was scarred by hurt. Didn't get any benefit. From their conversations, Tang Wentao was the worst, Xian Kaiping let down the most, and only Chi-Jean loved Chi and Sienna wholeheartedly. Because he was born from a grassroots background, he never disliked Chi and Sienna's family affairs. Moreover, Chi-Jean has one thing that none of the 3 of them have, which is honesty. Don't mess around with women, don't say a word to women, and always keep a certain distance from the opposite sex. Maybe it was like this that made Chi and Sienna willing to marry Chi-Jean. It's no wonder that Chi and Sienna couldn't bear the presence of a mistress in her marriage, because she had been accidentally mistressed, and the hurt caused by her previous 2 relationships made her very determined to cut off relationships. Even if the misunderstanding was resolved, Chi would be disappointed. Jean couldn't find a place to explain. After Chi and Yuman heard about her mother's past emotional entanglements with the 3 of them, she suddenly realized that she was still very happy. Compared with my mother, it is not easy to still face life positively after being hurt by so many men. It's no wonder that Chi and Sienna, Tang Wentao and Xian Kaiping were all lively and cheerful when they took photos. I think my mother's personality used to be more like mine. Later, due to the torture of fate, the edges were smoothed, and finally she became the quiet and gentle person she is now. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1040. Chapter 1040 Li Ning is Chi and Sienna 7. It's no wonder that Chi and Sienna, Tang Wentao and Xian Kaiping were all lively and cheerful when they took photos. I think my mother's personality used to be more like mine. Later, due to the torture of fate, the edges were smoothed, and finally she became the quiet and gentle person she is now. Chi and Sienna also listened to their stories quietly, with a calm expression on her face. She was like an outsider. Listening to them talk about her past tragic life, her mood was too calm, too calm. Sienna, are you willing to forgive me? I know you love me. It was really a misunderstanding. I also apologize for the words that hurt you. Xian Kaiping apologized solemnly, with a sincere attitude, and his eyes were filled with tears. He truly regretted it. It can even be said that he spent 25 years regretting his harsh words. Even if it is all a misunderstanding, if it is hurt, it is hurt. He has spent half his life regretting it, and he doesn't want to continue living with regret in the future. Kaiping, I. Chi and Sienna opened her mouth. I forgive you. I know your feelings for me. Although I am not you, I can always understand your regret and helplessness from your words and deeds. Let's not mention the past things again. Jian was very happy. Say this wisely. Perhaps Jian, who has recovered her memory, will not speak so calmly or say forgiveness easily. Just because she didn't understand how painful Jian was back then, just listening to them talk would always reduce a lot of painful details. Thank you, really. Xian Kaiping could no longer hold back the tears in his eyes and hid his face sadly. As for our wedding, I think we should postpone it. Maybe there is no need to hold a wedding. After all, I have already been your bride once, even if it has no legal effect and has not exchanged the ring. Are you still willing to marry me? Xian Kaiping raised his head in surprise, feeling a little excited. He never expected that Jian would want to marry him after knowing the truth. Jian shook her head, saw the sadness in his eyes, and comforted her softly. I can't marry you for the time being. Although many unpleasant things have happened between you and Jian, who has not lost his memory. But those are things in the past. Let the past things pass. We should also move forward in life. I can see how good you are to me. When I wake up, you light up my world with your endless tenderness. I always know that I am dependent and attached to you. As for love, I don't know. I don't know if there is, so can you give me some time? Jian's mood is actually very complicated. Just like some animals, the moment they open their eyes, the person they see is their mother. Isn't she? The first thing she saw was Xian Kaiping. Her attachment to Xian Kaiping was not just a simple attachment. She only agreed to marry him when she knew she couldn't leave him. She has seen Xian Kaiping's gentleness and kindness all year long. Even if she heard about the hurtful things he had done in the past, she could not be angry with him, because she understood how much emotion the man in front of her had for her, and his deep affection for her could not be expressed in just a few words. Even though he heard that he had hurt her in the past, she still couldn't bear to hurt him and left him completely. These words of Jian made Xian Kaiping rush over and hug her into his arms, not wanting to let her go again. End of this chapter.